Welcome back to another episode of Journey to Life with me, ArletteJones-Lawson, and my daughter and co-host, Constance Fields. Our topic today is the Black woman experience in America, in honor of February being Black History Month. This is part one of a three-part series, and today's focus will be on Black women, the backbone of family and society, Black women in medicine, and Black women in the workforce. I'm excited to have three generations represented today in our discussion. The baby boomer, Gen X, millennials, and Generation Z. We are honored today with our special guest, Blaise, host of two YouTube channels, HeyItsMeB and Secret Life of B. Welcome, Blaise.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me. I've been a big fan of this podcast for quite some time, so I'm very happy to be a guest on today's podcast and get to talk about a topic that I'm pretty excited to discuss, which is being a Black woman in America.
Yeah, Blaise, we are so happy to have you here. This topic is one that we all can identify with. It is definitely going to be interesting to have the discussion from different perspectives with the different generations. And one thing we're doing different with this particular episode is we're going to reference a few articles, and then we're going to just chat about it and give our own opinions. So the first part that I really want us to tackle is having to do with Black women being the backbone of society, the backbone of this country. That is the known idea. When you think about Big Mama, for instance, she is the backbone of her family. And, you know, you think about the way society views Black women as being strong and taking care of all these things. Well, this article from the Washington Post basically confirms what we knew, and that is that it's really hard out here for Black women. We don't have to be strong all the time, and we don't have to always be the backbone for everybody. But society has this idea that that's what we need to be. So in this article, it talks about how Black women are working harder for our country, and the country is actually not working harder for them. In other words, we are always the ones out in front. We're always the ones breaking all these barriers and you know, standing firm for other people. And then we're lagging behind. We're lacking. There's an article on Blavity.com that talks about Black women having it harder than other Americans. Y'all agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's almost expected that we're going to be the ones that make the sacrifices, that we're always going to be the ones that puts ourselves last. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a generational thing. I think that, you know, that's something that, you know, is kind of instilled in us, you know, from generations past, that that's what we do. So when it's what you've always done, you just never really question it. It's kind of embedded in us. It's kind of woven in our fabric, and it almost feels unnatural to us to put ourselves first and to ask for more. It almost feels like we're doing something wrong when we say, "Hey, me, what about me over here?"
Yeah, you know? I definitely resonate with that. Because being in between these three generations that we have on our panel today, I feel like a part of that idea of, oh, it's so hard to put me first, still lingers, while I've still been trying to break those chains of ideas and say, well, you know what, it's okay for self-care. It's okay for me to decide to do this instead of choosing to do that. Or it's okay to say no to the kids for doing something. It's all right, you know, like that sort of thing. Blaise, what's your take on this whole thing?
well, like a lot of people, like the public, just don't expect that Black women even need to ask for help. They think we're like invincible, that like we're made of steel and like we don't feel pain or we don't experience negative emotions like sadness or inadequacy. And so it's like they almost get surprised when we're like voicing all of the, you know, dark thoughts we have, or, you know, sadnesses that we experience. And so, yeah, I definitely feel like it's important that we strive to share our experiences, not always being perfect all the time or not always being strong all the time, because it kind of breaks those stereotypes, not only for our own communities, but for everyone else that sees us and thinks these incorrect beliefs about us.
Yeah, like we're not robots.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're not robots. And, you know, and another thing about that is we're so unaccustomed to speaking up when we have needs, that when we finally do say something, we're so frustrated that, you know, that it comes out maybe a little stronger than normal. And that's because it's a buildup. It's been building up, building up. We've been keeping quiet, keeping quiet, keeping quiet until the pot overflows. You know, it's like, you know, an explosion. And sometimes, you know, we're so frustrated that, you know, that whole mentality of us being harsh and hard, I think it's a result partly of, you know, how we respond when we've reached our limit. And so I think it's really important that we learn to, you know, speak up all along. It's okay to interrupt and to say, you know, yeah, no, I don't really agree with that, or I don't really appreciate the way I'm being treated right now. And it's okay to voice that along the way and not get to a point when it's too much.
I will say though, a lot of people like to tone police us. Like even when we are calm and speaking rationally, they think, well, calm down, you got an attitude, when we're actually just speaking confidently.
I would agree with that. I was actually gonna make that point that, you know, while we want to speak up and we want to, you know, stand on whatever our beliefs are or however we genuinely feel, people do tone police us. They do, you know, I think I saw a TikTok video of this woman in a store, and she said something. Oh, it was a clip of a TV show on Amazon Prime. I can't think of the name of the show, but it was a flashback for the main character going back to when her and her mother were in a store. And her mother said something simple, like, why are you, to the store owner, why are you following us? And, you know, you're singling us out. And the store owner was like, whoa, calm down. Like you're being very aggressive right now. Like I feel threatened, you know, and that's this whole thing. And we can speak, you know, separately about Black men and this idea of aggression, but Black women have their own struggle. We have our own struggles with this idea of aggression, and we have to police ourselves on how we talk and wear a mask, and it's exhausting. Like code switching, it's exhausting.
Yeah, it is very exhausting, and I think that, you know, part of it is education for others and not just for us, because I think that because folks are so unaccustomed to us speaking up, that when we do, it's automatically assumed that we're being aggressive, and they're intimidated because they're not accustomed to that. And I think that there's work on both sides that needs to happen. We need to speak up more often so people get used to hearing our voice more often. And they need to get used to the fact that we are going to speak up. And, you know, it doesn't matter that, you know, that we speak confidently. We have to be confident. You know, to be the backbone of anything, structurally, you've got to be sound. So, you know, we must be confident.
Right.
And, you know, and I think that, you know, there's work on both sides, on the hearers and us.
Definitely. And that kind of leads us into the next part of this, which is talking about Black women in medicine, because we have not really been taught to speak up when it comes to authority figures like a doctor. Communicating our needs. We've not been really taught societally and historically as Black women to stand up whenever we have something that feels off or we feel uncomfortable, or we don't think that's quite right, or we need more.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm going to reference two articles regarding Black women in medicine. The first article is from Forbes Magazine, entitled "The Nastiness That Black Women Experience in America is Suffocating." A study conducted in 2016 found that almost 50% of first and second year medical students said that they believe such myths as Black people have thicker skin and have less sensitive nerve endings than white people, and Black people's blood coagulates more quickly than white people. The truth is that racism and white supremacist perspectives are a malignancy that's interwoven into the fabric of America's cultural norms and beliefs. Black women are a casualty of this and consequently targeted by both sexist and racist treatments. And I just want to interject there. We do have like two things working against us when it comes to discrimination. And those are two things that are present immediately. Like, people don't have to guess and wonder if you have a degree in a certain subject, or if you have expertise, or you have a gift in areas. When they see us, they see Black woman. So we are both targets of sexism and racism. The article continues to say that they constantly live at the intersection of hyper visibility and invisibility. So it's like you were saying, Constance, you know, the woman in the store. I mean, that's like hyper visibility. You know, they see her immediately, and that's who they choose to follow. Or invisibility, where we're not even seen or recognized at all. And, you know, and that's, that is a struggle that we face.
Can I just add, I think that, you know, you spoke to the almost duality of it, in that you have Black physicians, Black female physicians, and then you have Black patients, Black female patients. So the Black female physicians, you know, they can walk into a room and a person who is not Black could say, you know, oh, I want to see the doctor. And they can say, well, I am the doctor, or I am your surgeon. And they just find it hard to believe, or they just, you know, want somebody different. And the Black female patient is like poo-pooed. A lot of the issues can be like downplayed, you know?
Yeah.
It's not really that bad for you, you know? Well, we've done what we can, like, you know, and there's who's advocating for us? Who's advocating for us? We have to advocate for ourselves. It's so exhausting.
We have to advocate for ourselves and our families and friends even. You know, we are perceived as activists. And I think that we come out of the womb as activists. I mean, I think it's just something that we do. Then another article in the American Association of American Medical Colleges talks about false ideas about Black people, how we experience pain that can lead to worrisome treatment disparities, you know. And in a 2016 study, for example, trainees who believe that Black people are not as sensitive to pain as white people were less likely to treat Black people's pain appropriately. And I can personally speak to that. I had major surgery a few months back, and the pain that I was experiencing that sent me to the hospital in the first place was like so intense. I mean, it was, words cannot even express just how painful and how much pain I was in. And throughout my stay in the ER, while they were running different tests and I was expressing my pain and they were giving me pain meds and they weren't touching my pain. And I was, they'd ask me on a scale from 1 to 10, what's your pain level? And my pain level stayed at a 9 or 10, and they give me more medicine and my pain level was still at like a 9 or 10. And at one point, one of the, I think it was one of the nurses said to me, well, we're giving you the strongest medicine that we can. So it was almost like they looked at me like I was drug seeking.
Yeah.
Like, or that I'm so accustomed to taking drugs that it's going to take a higher dose to help my pain, give me pain relief. It was almost, excuse me, it was almost like I was being othered, and I was being put into whatever their stereotype of a Black person needing pain meds are. And it wasn't until after my test results came back that one of the doctors said to me that in his whole time being at that particular hospital, he had never seen numbers as high as mine. It was, and all the doctors discussed that because it was like, wow, this is unbelievable. She's been in that much pain. And then at that point, they started treating my pain. But I can't help but to know and realize that had my complexion been different, and I said pain, they would have treated the pain first.
Yeah.
They would have focused on the pain relief first.
Right.
Along with getting the test results. And if the test results had proven that my pain, that my numbers were more average and not that bad, then they would have come to me and said something, a little kinder, like, oh, well, your numbers, you shouldn't be in as much pain as you are, so we're going to taper you down. It would have been more of that discussion instead of me having to prove how much pain I'm in and having to wait until they have evidence to prove that I'm telling the truth. Exactly. And so it just, it's just a frustrating place to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, it wouldn't have even gotten to that point if the doctors you were working with previously had believed your symptoms and weren't just trying to take the easy way out, because they honestly, some doctors don't really even care or value Black women's safety or comfortability. And because I was on TikTok and a few days ago, I heard this story about this Black woman who's an esthetician, and she was working for a white office, and they were treating this woman who was having a lot of skin issues, and they were going to treat her with lasers, like laser treatment. And a lot of people know that laser treatment works differently on our skin than it does on white skin. And the Black esthetician was telling him, hey, like, this might not be the right way to heal this woman. And he was like, no, I know what I'm talking about. You don't. Get back in line and do what I tell you to do. And so she actually told the woman, that was asking for help, like, hey, this is what the doctor wants you to do, but this is what I suggest to you as a fellow Black woman. And she got reprimanded for that. She got in trouble, and she ended up leaving and starting her own, business. But I think that's just a common experience that a lot of Black women have, that they have to be their own advocate, but they also have to, they have to experience this thing where white doctors don't even understand their experience because they either don't know, they're ignorant, or they don't care to know. They don't care to educate themselves.
Well, that's very good point, Blaise. Very, very good point. And I think that goes back to the fact that when a lot of times when they're testing meds for different medical issues, that their target audience is Caucasian, and it is not minorities. I know that a couple of years ago, I mean, I'm diabetic, but I have high blood pressure. And one of the meds that they have me on is like a popular med, that lisinopril. And it's a popular med, and it's one of those one size fits all kind of medicines. And I'd been taking it for years, and all of a sudden I had an allergic response that started closing up my throat. I was having difficulty breathing, and then went to the hospital, and when they ran all their tests, they determined that, oh yeah, you have a allergy to ACE inhibitors, to lisinopril. And I said, well, I've been taking it for years. Well, I don't understand. And they said, well, we found that with African Americans, that at some point your body may react in a way that shows that you have an allergy to it. It can be immediately or it can be over time. But that's just with African Americans. And so, but it is a drug that they prescribe for everybody, including African Americans. So if you know that that's an issue that may come up, then why aren't you finding cures and meds that can treat our issues with all of the factors that are in play?
Right.
Now, we would like to take a brief pause to share with you an example of medical bias as it relates to racism. This is a brief overview of an episode in the series finale of New Amsterdam. The episode is entitled Right Place, Season 5, Episode 12. This episode speaks directly to the medical issues related to race that we are discussing today.
In this episode, the medical director of the New Amsterdam Hospital is celebrating and toasting the drug company for finding a cure for a particular type of cancer. This is the type of cancer that he was diagnosed with 5 years ago. He is shortly joined by the chief of oncology, who informs him that this drug is a sham. Later, when reviewing the documentation for this medical trial, the oncology chief points out that although the medicine is showing over an 80% cure rate for its participants, 87% of its participants were Caucasians, and that there would be no way of guaranteeing that this particular medicine would be safe for everyone if no minorities were part of the drug trial. Well, the medical director agreed and made the unpopular decision, however, the right decision, not to release this drug for FDA approval. Well, later, when confronted by the hospital director and representative of the drug company, they asserted that the drug has proven that it is an effective cure. They argued that this drug should be released for FDA approval because it does cure this particular type of cancer. They acknowledged that the drug trial participants were not reflective of the population as a whole, but believed that it should be released as it may help so. Well, the medical director of New Amsterdam's response to them was that he was not willing to submit a drug for approval that said whites only.
This was a powerful and thought-provoking episode, and we encourage all to watch it. The episode is available on Amazon Prime Video. Now, back to our discussion.
Yeah, and one other story I wanted to bring up here is there was this woman on TikTok. Again, I'm always on TikTok, but she was talking about how she got an injury to her head and she had a gash in her head and it needed staples. And so she went to the doctor. They told her she would only need 2 staples, and they were telling her, well, since you only need 2 staples, it wouldn't make sense for us to put 2 injections of numbing medication. So why don't we just do the 2 staples? And she was like, I guess. And so they did the 2 staples, and then they realized after that she needed more staples. So she ended up getting 6 staples with no numbing medication. And I can't help but think that would have been very different had she not been a Black woman.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
A total disregard.
Mm-hmm. And we can also, I can speak to having younger children too. My daughter, she grew up with a disorder, or I don't know what to call it, but it's called pre-adrenal adrenarche. It's where you mature a lot faster than your peers. And so I would have to take her to a pediatric endocrinologist. And this pediatric endocrinologist specialist that we took her to was an older white man. And he basically made me feel like we needed to change her diet when it comes to things he was assuming we fed her, like fried chicken, sodas, all these different things. And I was like, well, I said to him, we actually don't eat fried chicken, we bake our chicken. And he was like, okay, well, she doesn't need to be having that. She doesn't need to be having sodas and really cut back on this. I was like, we're doing this. So is this assumption that we are this other person, this other being than we really are? We're just...
It's almost like it takes away our freedom for being, kind of independent of the box, the label. And it's like, it's hard, I think, for some people to see us as individuals.
That's just interesting. But Blaise, you were going to talk about gynecology and how that fits into all this.
Yeah, so a last article that we'll bring up in this section is about the father of modern gynecology, who goes by the name James Marion Sims. And for those of you who don't know, he was one of the most famous physicians in the country in 1876. And the reason why he's brought up in today's discussion is because there was ethical questions raised about how he developed his surgical techniques. So Sims perfected a technique to repair fistulas, which are holes between the vagina and the bladder or rectum and can lead to incontinence. By repeatedly conducting painful experimental surgeries on enslaved Black women without using anesthesia. And these Black women who, like prisoners, could not meaningfully consent because they could not refuse. And of course, whenever someone asked this of Sims, he would say, well, these women were willing to do it, even though they really had no other option. And so, I think this really plays into even today. I'm on TikTok, like I said before, I'm on TikTok, and I'm hearing this discussion from women about how painful and almost barbaric gynecology procedures are. And they wonder why we haven't had any improvement in making, women feel more comfortable in these types of procedures. And people were saying, well, this ties back to slavery because these procedures were created on Black bodies and they obviously didn't care about our comfortability or our safety. And so I think a lot of women today kind of specifically seek out Black gynecologists just to know, like, we have this safety net or comfortability with someone that we know knows our experience and can understand that our pain is real, our uncomfortability is real. And I'll admit, I even myself have seeked out at least a woman of color as a gynecologist, just to know that, like, I'm in somewhat good hands,
Yeah. Listen, when I moved from Florida to Georgia, my gynecologist, love her so much. She is a Black woman. She's a nurse practitioner. I had been on a certain birth control for years. Was dealing with like high blood pressure issues, swelling in my feet, like all kinds of things. When I saw her, she was like, what birth control are you on? I told her. She said, oh no, we have to get you off of that right now. That is not good for us. That is not good for you. You basically could die at any moment from taking this. I'm taking you off. And ever since then, I've felt so much better.
Wow.
It makes a difference.
It absolutely does. It's like we need for advancements in medicine to consider the diversity of our country. We're not, we're there's so many differences that we all share, and not just African Americans, but Hispanics and Mexicans, and just different other ethnic groups. We need to be considered when you're developing medicines or when you're developing procedures, and just look at the differences. And we're all human, we all experience pain. If I break my arm, it's gonna hurt the same as anybody else that breaks their arm. It's not that, oh, I can tolerate it a whole lot better because my my pain threshold is larger because because I'm African American, you know, and it just kind of goes back to that assumption that, you know, that our nerve endings are somehow different because we're African American. And I think that goes back to us speaking up because I know growing up, you know, my mama used to tell me when I'd go to the dentist, which I did not love and is like a phobia of mine. But when I'd go to the dentist, my mama would tell me in advance, now, don't be crying or don't be, just they've got to do this or just know they've got to do it and prepare yourself. But I don't want to hear you groaning or mumbling or crying when they're doing it. And so, the doctors are working on you and you're in pain, but you're taught not to say anything and to just kind of grin and bear it. And it may, lead to a false assumption that my pain threshold is, somehow higher because I didn't speak up,
Yeah, this has been great. We could talk about this specific topic for hours, I'm sure. I want us to transition into talking about Black women and the workforce, because I don't know that it's talked about enough. And it's talked about in our circles, but I don't think that society recognizes just how much it affects us. So I'm going to read this pretty verbatim because I think it's important. I want to get it right. So there's data that the US Census Bureau has collected that found that Black women in the workforce had their median annual earnings decline by 5% between 2004 and 2014. Now that's been a while, but I'm sure those numbers haven't gotten much better, if at all. And by 2014, Black women's median annual wages were 64.6% of what white men were taking home. And another aspect of this is getting approved for loans, business loans, home loans. It's harder for Black women to do that. And so I would love for us to discuss that because, I
also want to throw in two other statistics. The Department of Labor has a blog, and they stated in their blog that as of January 2022, adult Black women's unemployment rate is 1.8 times their white counterparts. And also, Black women's employment has recovered the least among major races and ethnicity groups, with 2.6 fewer adult Black women employed in January 22 than February 2020. So this is like a result of the pandemic, and we have recovered the least.
Yeah.
Wow. I can see that. I mean, it's like what Constance was saying, when she said she's sure that things haven't changed that much, and it actually hasn't changed that much. And and I can't help but noticing my grandbaby in the background. So yeah, absolutely. And Constance, did you want to?
Yeah, so there's more information about. I mean, we could dive deeper into this. There's a study that was posted to hbr.org that is actually called The Cost of Racial Color Blindness. And this idea of color blindness, or I don't see color, that's something that we deal with, consistently, and we have for over the years. But we have a natural tendency to see people's color first, their racial identity first. Like we tend to see that when we walk into a room. When you are colorblind, you don't see that. And that the idea is that you are doing that almost as like a not wanting to recognize our prejudice that we have.
Right.
And it's an innate thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing to notice people of color. Like, I don't know about you all, but when I walk into a room, I'm seeking out the people of color. I'm seeking that out. But maybe somebody who is not a person of color or not a Black woman might be like, oh, I don't want to notice that this is a Black woman that I'm talking to, because does that make me racist? What does that mean about me that I'm noticing she's a Black woman?
Absolutely. I think that there's like a misconception that to recognize your color is a form of racism.
Right.
And it is absolutely not. I mean, you know, if you don't see my color, you don't see me. And that's not, my color is not all of who I am, but it is a part of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so to say that you are, that you don't see color or you're colorblind doesn't speak to whether or not you're racist or not.
Exactly.
So, you know, see me, notice me. I walk in a room, I am Black and I am a woman. Those are things that are never going to change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You know?
it almost seems like a cop-out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they think they're doing a favor by saying, oh, I don't see color. And a lot of the times these white people don't realize that, like, it's not an issue to see color. The issue is you see color and you're judging us for it. What we need to do is recognize our differences and appreciate that we have differences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that article goes on to say that, you know, rather than avoiding race, rather than avoiding it, basically, companies that are smart deal with it head on. They don't dance around it. They recognize that embracing diversity means recognizing all races, including the majority one, to avoid showing preference or creating a backlash. And it went on to say, it gave an example of Time Warner's annual diversity summit. It isn't just for women of color or people of color. It's populated by white males too. So talking about race can feel awkward, but over time, more companies will start to discover that doing so is actually better than pretending that it doesn't exist. Yeah. And I know we're going to get into microaggressions a little bit, but I wanted to add this in that I worked for a company where I was the only Black woman. I was the only Black woman. There was another Black person in the company, but I never saw that person. And anytime I felt like I was experiencing a microaggression, I would bring it up to this person, my supervisor, and this person was a white male. He didn't get it. It wasn't really a big thing. I brought it up to the HR person, who was a white female, and it was like, oh, that shouldn't be happening. I mean, my cousin is Black, you know, that really, you know, and it just, I was like, okay, well, this is not solving anything.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, also along with that is when you do find that you're one of the few minorities in an organization or a company, you know, when people point you out as being an example of them or evidence of them not being racist. Yeah, we have her in our company. See, we've got representation. You know, we've got one in our midst. See, we're not racist. We hired her and she's great and she's articulate and she's, you know, all of these things. And it's like, you know, I'm not, you know, it almost goes back to slavery when they had a token.
Yeah.
Or, you know, or a house minority. That, you know, that person, you know, that person was elevated to a higher level than, you know, than his slavery counterparts, but he was still a slave.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So
Yeah.
like,
Well, going back to diversity, like, I hope these companies know, like, just because you are pushing diversity doesn't mean you're still not going about it the wrong way. I think some companies are not very genuine or authentic about wanting to push diversity, and they do it just so they can have a token Black person to say, hey, we're not racist. You know, Joe's Black. Like,
exactly. Joe's Black.
Yeah. Your person's color, right?
Another thing too. 2 Black women in a company. You're the only 2 Black women. Okay. You gotta think. One of you was the only Black woman for so long. Then here comes another one. So you two could either have a coalition or you could be put against each other.
Yeah.
And there was, I know we reference TikTok a lot, but Blaise and I are TikTok connoisseurs.
Yeah.
But I saw this video of this woman saying, I think she was joking about it, but she was saying how she had been working at her job for so long. She was used to like wearing her hair a certain way, not having to put forth much effort. And then here comes this new Black woman, and she is put together, hair done, hair laid, like always looking. And she's like, look, now we gonna be on the same page, and now I gotta put forth effort. Like what?
I can't have my 3-week-old braids in no more.
Right. Yeah.
One last thing about companies and diversity, I really hope that they don't look at diversity as like something that's forced on them, and they do really want to strive to diversify their workspace, because not only is it like morally a good thing, but also it's good for the company too. Like when you have diverse perspectives, you might be able to avoid certain controversies because you have different people in your company, on your board, helping with these decisions.
Absolutely, especially when whatever you're in, whether it's marketing or healthcare or whatever you're in, your clientele is diverse,
right?
Period. And if you have multiple perspectives, then you can better serve the whole, and it benefits you like more broadly. It benefits you, in greater ways, because you're able to touch different segments of the population and meet the majority needs, meet more people's needs.
What's your take on ambition and Black women? There's this idea of a Black woman who is ambitious, let alone being a woman who is ambitious, but adding in being a Black woman who's ambitious in trying to move up in her company. In order to be ambitious, you have to be assertive. You have to have some level of aggressiveness, and not mean aggression, but like you're asserting yourself. Yeah. You're asserting your authority, or you're trying to move up the ranks. How do you feel that other people view us when we are that way?
It's not surprised that Black women have to be more assertive and have to work harder to get to those areas. When it comes to people's opinions on us and like thinking like we're just, I don't know, money hungry or something, I think it's kind of ridiculous. Like go back to the tone policing. Like people think we're like just mean women, or we're heartless, and I just think like we're after the same thing you guys are after. We just have to work a little bit harder because we didn't start from the same line as you guys.
Right.
I think that our assertiveness is often viewed as aggression. Mm-hmm. I don't think our assertiveness is ever viewed as us being assertive. Mm-hmm. I think that the baseline is aggression. So when we assert ourselves, we're more often than not, viewed as being aggressive. Mm-hmm. And people respond to aggression very differently than they do assertiveness. Even when we assert ourselves, people that we maybe manage, or people that we, are in direct contact with, that we impact what they do, I don't think that they view that that the level where we are, I don't think they view that in the same way. You know what I mean? Like if we give a directive, I don't think that it's received in the same way as if a white man gave a directive. It would be, okay, got my orders from headquarters, I'm moving out. But if it's us giving the directive, I think it's, let me think. I'm not sure that's a good idea. I'm not sure. Let me think about it. Let me think if I have time to do that. I'm not, it's like all these other things factor into it instead of got my orders, I know what I got to do, got to just do it.
Yeah. And I think too, it may be harder for some people to see Black women in leadership positions, or being their supervisor,
Right.
or, the CEO or what have you. I mean, Stacey Abrams, but, she had the opportunity to be the governor of Georgia twice, but a certain population had an issue with seeing a Black woman be that kind of a leader.
Yeah, I feel like people love a girl boss until it's a Black woman. Then it's like, we don't really
Say
want a girl
it
boss.
again.
Yeah.
Say it again. Microaggressions, though, we didn't touch on that.
It almost feels a little bit like passive aggressiveness. When you're like in the presence of somebody that's being passive aggressive, and they're saying something, but they're saying it nicely, or, but you get the point, it still strikes the blow. You know what I mean? I think that microaggressions are little things that that may be natural to some, but but they're not, either they don't care or they're not considering how it's affecting the Black woman.
Yeah. So microaggressions are so common, especially when it comes to Black women, that some people don't even recognize that it's a microaggression. They think it's like a normal, okay thing to say. And like, you can have microaggressions in any type of way, but like microaggressions about your hair, the food you eat, the way you're talking. I mean, being the only Black woman in some of my classes and in work, I've been also called like an Oreo, which is like Black on the outside, white on the inside, because of the way I speak. And they think it's like a joke, but like it is a microaggression, because like, what do you mean I speak white? There's no way to speak white and there's no way to speak Black. I'm just speaking.
And you're being described the need to always include, she's very articulate. Well, how else am I supposed to? I mean, what else did you expect?
Exactly.
But it almost denotes the perception that most Black people aren't articulate, but she's one. She's articulate.
And just because you speak AABE doesn't mean you're not speaking with like value. Like, you can still have a really good thing you're saying and it's still AABE.
Absolutely. Our governor is trying to classes that teach Black history. He's trying to get those classes banned in Florida, in the state of Florida. I know that it's a thing that makes people uncomfortable about our history, but the thing about history is it's past, but it's still reality. And it still informs future generations. And to ignore it doesn't make it go away. And to not speak about it doesn't make it any less true. We have a history. We do come from a generation of slaves. Caucasians came from a generation of masters over slaves. That's reality. And just because we don't want to hear about it anymore doesn't take it away, doesn't make it disappear. We do have a history that needs to be acknowledged by not just African Americans, but it needs to be acknowledged by the country as a whole. Because how do we fix it? And I can't help but to feel like those that don't want to face the past, don't want to hear about our history, are those that want to repeat it.
And I want to point out that it's not just white people who we have these experiences with. I, for instance, speaking to the microaggression part for just a second, I experienced microaggressions from someone who was a minority. They weren't Black, but they were a minority. And the way in which it was said to me was that somehow I'm less of a Black person because I don't do X, Y, Z.
Right. Yeah.
Well, you don't do that. Oh, you ain't Black. Well, what? You're not Black yourself. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, I've heard that. Like, I'm Blacker than you. Like,
Yeah.
Like, you want the racism too?
Yeah.
The two of you, though, I have a question. Since I imagine you guys might have been also the only Black person in your company or in your classes, do you ever feel pressure to correct people on the microaggressions, or do you feel like you can't speak up because to them you're the good Black person, you're like the example? Like, how do you go about when you hear racist comments or even just microaggressions?
But I would say both, and because I found myself the first 2 times internalizing it because we were in a professional setting, and I didn't want to react the way that internally I felt. The last time it happened, I internalized it for a few minutes, and then I formalized my words and I watched what I said carefully, but I made sure to express how what she said made me feel and how it was not okay and why it was not okay.
Because I'm older, I've kind of experienced a lot of the gamut. So when I was younger and easily intimidated, I kept it all in, and I never spoke up. I mean, I would go home and be upset about it, but I never spoke up. I never tried to correct it. Now I correct it almost immediately. And maybe we're in a meeting setting, and then somebody says something that is that shows microaggression. I may not embarrass them in that setting, but immediately after that meeting, I'm calling them up. Hey, we need to talk, because I don't know if you realize this, because I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to give you the benefit of knowing you meant no harm by it, that you didn't know any better. So it's my responsibility to educate you on it. Mm-hmm. That is offensive. I try to correct it, pretty immediately. And I think it's my responsibility to do it. I'm the one that experienced it. It's my responsibility to try to make sure that no other African-American has to experience that type of microaggression from that person. I can't fix it for everybody, but I can surely try my best to make sure that that person doesn't do that again.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring up the whole Black Lives Matter movement for a minute. So I was talking to one of my chiefs years ago, and she wasn't understanding the whole Black Lives Matter movement. And she said, I don't understand the Black Lives Matter. All lives matter. And yes, that's true. And, we're not saying that all lives, don't matter, but we're saying Black Lives Matter too. And it wasn't until she talked to one of the other supervisors who's white, mm-hmm. and the supervisor said to her, rainforest matters. And she said, all forests matters. And she said, yeah, but rainforests are endangered. It clicked for her. And sometimes it takes not hearing it from us, hearing it from, another Caucasian person that gets it, that understands, to be able to explain.
We have had a really robust, exciting, entertaining at times conversation today. Did you all have any last words that you wanted to add? Any last thoughts?
I'm just very happy that we're having this discussion. It's a tough discussion and it can be uncomfortable at times, but in honor of Black History Month, we want to make sure that we address things frankly, and in an environment where we can be honest and open. Our intention is not to offend or not to discount somebody's that's absolutely not racist. but just have no idea. Our goal is to make the world a better place, and African American women are a big part of it. And our contributions are, vast. And, we have the ability to make things happen and to help make our country better. And, we just need to be recognized.
I look forward to us having another conversation. This has been great. So make sure you tune in next time, and make sure you check out the articles that we're going to reference in the text, so you can do your own research on the things that we were discussing today. And let us know what your opinions are. How do you feel about this topic? How do you feel about the things that we discussed today? Let us know. We'd love to hear from you.
So until next time, be safe, and thank you for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.